I'm Jochen Kaempf. I'm an associate professor in physical oceanography at the School of the Environment at Flinders University. And I've been involved in the discussion about desalination plants in Australia for the last 4 or 5 years since the very start. The key issue is actually the big energy requirements. You know, it's all part of the discussion about carbon tax and increased greenhouse gas emissions also. So all the significant water price increases and electricity increases that we see in most capital Australian cities are directly linked to the infrastructure investment of desalination plant, and that's a big thing. And marine impacts, that's an additional story. So I'm here for 10 years now, intensively studying South Australian Gulfs. And when I first heard about the plan to discharge desalination brine in South Australian Gulfs, I thought that they must be crazy, because there is a feature that we call a Dodge tide, which are 2 to 3 day time periods where there is no tidal flow, virtually little tidal flow. So if you discharge pollutants into the sea, if there's a tidal flow, it mixes away pollutants. If you have now a time window of 2 to 3 days where there is no flow and you have no big storm coming in, there is the potential of what we call the formation of brine underflows. If you discharge brine water, it's denser, it's heavier than the ambient water, and it tends to fall back to the seafloors. What they do is they use a system where they inject the brine from the bottom of the sea, and it's very similar to sprinkler systems that we're used to. So they spray the brine water into the ocean, it falls back, it mixes, it falls back to the ocean. If there's no tidal flow, if there's no big storms, no big waves coming, what happens is that this water can form a pool, a thin layer, only 1 to 2 meters thick, sitting on the seafloor. Problem is that the oxygen slowly becomes used up, because there are bottom-dwelling creatures which live, there are seagrasses, and nobody knows how long does it take before the oxygen falls to a critical level, which then can kill off most of marine life, like the cuttlefish who live most of their time near the bottom. And it could take 5 days, it could take 4 days, we don't know. And that's the critical moment of the formation of deoxygenated zones, dead zones near the seafloor. And you only need one event to cause significant damage. So it's not about 99% of the time it will work fine. If it doesn't work fine for 1% or for one period in one of the years, so I think the Olympic Dam expansion is supposed to be operational for the next 50 years or so, one point in time causes severe damage. Because there are 2 most important guidelines that if you want to discharge pollutants into the sea is, 1, the choice of location is critical, because some locations are better than others. Yeah, so if you think about open ocean coastline, if you discharge brine, you know, in open ocean means really the deep ocean in contact with the Southern Ocean, yeah, better than some sheltered bays, inlets, you know. Essentially any location within South Australian Gulf is much worse than any open ocean location. The second rule is you should avoid regions which are ecologically important. So if you have a region like Upper Spencer Gulf, which accommodates an iconic species like the giant Australian cuttlefish, you have to be very careful. You shouldn't touch that region, yeah? If there is an alternative. The best survey or the best summary of the uniqueness and the high biodiversity of the Upper Spencer Gulf region is actually documented in the BHP Billiton Environmental Impact Statement. It is impressive. You see thousands of different species, which some are unique to the region. Have a look at how impressive the marine ecology, in particular of the Upper Spencer Gulf region, is. Why is that? It's because It's far away from the open ocean. It's sheltered. There's no big waves, storm waves going into that region. And it's also a region which is higher in natural salinity. We call it an inverse estuary. How do companies decide which location they prefer? Yeah? Do they think about the environment? Do they think about the cuttlefish? Or do they estimate the costs of having a pipeline which must be 300 kilometers longer or 100 kilometers longer or so? They look at economic impacts primarily. Yeah, so they look, these are all the factors, but it will be $500 million cheaper to do it there. There must be something wrong in the process, because there must be some independent scientist or independent expert panel coming and saying and deciding, don't do it in Upper Spencer Gulf, or don't do it in South Australian Gulfs. And there is a process, and that's the Marine Parks Initiative, which unfortunately started a little bit too late. If you build a desalination plant somewhere, you need a power plant, you know. The second thing is you need to build a pipeline. What we've proposed is something like Seduna. It's a little bit more complicated than this, because in South Australia we also have an important coastal upwelling system. So you can't say, okay, we just build it near Port Lincoln. You know, you can't build it there, because then Kaempf would come and say, oh, wait a second. So what I said before, open ocean is better than Upper Spencer Gulf. Yes, but not in a coastal upwelling system. What it means is you have to investigate a specific region. But if you go further up to Seduna, it's better, it's away from this upwelling system, and it's also there you have some infrastructure. That would be a good location. BHP Billiton says, oh, the tides are not as good. They don't want that. So what matters in these economic models is costs, and it's infrastructure. And you can read all these argumentations in the supplementary EIS, because it looks primarily at costs. The mining companies, they are so rich, you can't believe it would be a drop of water on a hot rock for BHP Billiton to actually build the desalination plant somewhere else. The bizarre thing is that they say it's the best technology, everything is under control, there will be no impacts, there will be monitoring. And the ridiculous point is that they say it's the best location. How many alternative locations did they look at? Was that something like 20, 30, 40 all over? And there you have to say it is a perverse situation. Nobody can tell, not the locals, not the scientists, nobody, that this region is better than any other regions around the Gulfs and along the southwestern coastline. It's just absolutely ridiculous, and I would be appalled as a scientist to be involved in this manipulation, misuse of scientific advice.